What if the king of rock and roll never actually became a movie star? Let's dive into a really fascinating what-if in music history, one where Elvis Presley dodges the creative trap of the 1960s and, in doing so, changes his entire legacy forever. To really get this, you have to understand there were basically two different Elvis Presleys. First, you've got the rebel, that raw, world-changing rock and roller from the 1950s. And then, you've got the movie star, the face of a kind of formulaic, soundtrack-churning machine in the 1960s. And that, right there, is the central conflict of his entire career.
So how did he get from point A to point B? Well, it all started with what you could call the Hollywood detour, a time that, for many, was really just a creative trap. And the man pulling the strings behind this big shift was his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. See, he looked at Hollywood and just saw a gold mine. So pretty soon, the whole focus moved away from making incredible music and onto cranking out movies and their soundtracks. It was a business move, plain and simple, all about safe money over any kind of artistic risk. And when you look back, the verdict on this era is pretty much unanimous. Music historians are clear. They call it a period of creative stagnation. That rebellious fire from the 50s, it got traded in for these kind of forgettable pop songs that were gone as soon as the movie credits rolled.
But it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if the priority had stayed on the music he was genuinely passionate about? What if he'd just taken a different road entirely?
So let's imagine this first alternate path, one where Elvis goes right back to the roots, back to the very foundation of his revolutionary sound.
You have to remember, Elvis didn't just invent rock and roll out of thin air. His genius was in his ability to synthesize, to blend. He soaked up all the sounds of Memphis, especially from the black blues and R&B artists who laid the groundwork. I mean, his very first hits, like That's All Right, were literally blues covers. That DNA was always there.
Okay, so here's the crucial fork in the road, 1961, and our alternate timeline. Instead of jetting off to Hollywood, Elvis heads back to the studios in Memphis. Just imagine him spending the whole decade just diving deep into classic blues standards, maybe even recording at the legendary Stax Records. He could have merged his style with that incredible Memphis soul sound that was bubbling up. And just think about the difference in the music we would have gotten. We could have had these raw, gritty, authentic covers of blues legends like Howlin' Wolf or Jimmy Reed. Instead, we got songs from movies like Clam Bake, with lyrics telling us to do the clam. The artistic whiplash is just staggering. But you know, the blues wasn't his only true passion. There was another, maybe even deeper, musical well he could have gone to: the powerful, incredible sound of gospel. Elvis grew up on this stuff. Southern gospel wasn't just music to him, it felt spiritual. It was part of his soul. This is the music he'd sing backstage to warm up, the music he always returned to in his private life. It was a true, genuine, lifelong passion. And don't for a second think this was some niche interest that nobody would have bought. No way. This path was absolutely commercially viable. His 1960 gospel album, His Hand in Mine, wasn't just some little side project. It was a huge hit. It hit number 7 on the main Billboard pop charts. The audience was totally there for it. See, in our real timeline, these amazing gospel albums were just rare treats, kind of squeezed in between all the movie duties. But in this alternate timeline, gospel becomes a central pillar of his career. Imagine him releasing a new gospel album every single year, letting him truly explore that incredible voice in the genre he loved the most. So, what's the end game here? What's the real impact of swapping a decade of movie fluff for deep dives into blues and gospel? Well, it means his legacy would be completely different. Just think about the domino effect. He spends the 60s actually honing his craft, building this incredible catalog of respected roots music. Because of that, the famous '68 special is no longer a comeback at all. It's just a continuation of what he's been doing. And the result? His legacy as a truly serious artist is cemented, no questions asked.
And honestly, that's the whole story right there. In our history, that '68 special was this explosive moment that reminded everyone, hey, the King's still got it. But in this alternate timeline, nobody would have ever forgotten. It wouldn't have been a comeback. It would have been more like a coronation, the amazing continuation of the artist he'd been all along.
So ultimately, it really just comes down to perception. I mean, nobody denies that Elvis was a phenomenal, once-in-a-lifetime entertainer. But a whole decade of focused, serious, artistic work would have elevated him to something even more.
a consistently evolving, serious artist. It would have put his 60s albums on the exact same legendary tier as his groundbreaking 50s work.
So it kind of leaves us with one final fun question. If Elvis had really taken this path, what songs would you have loved to hear him sing? Is there a blues standard or a gospel hymn that you just know he would have made his own? It's a pretty cool thing to think about for one of the greatest voices we've ever had.